You plug that in your ear.
I've got one here. Shall I plug you in?
Is everybody in? At this time, I'll call the meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. We do have an agenda before us. I would ask that we have one addition, and that would be agenda item number, we'll call it 21, of new business. That would be consider the approval of appointment to the Planning Commission. If that's okay with the council, we'll add that. Any other changes or deletions, corrections to the agenda? If not, then we'll move along then to consider the approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting that was held on February 26th. Council does have the minutes. Are there corrections?
Move approval.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve, to approve the minutes as they have been presented. We will move to a vote. Close the voting. And that motion does pass. We'll then move along then to a public hearing. We have a series of public hearings this evening. The first public hearing will be what is listed as agenda item number 3. This is on the Foley edition. We'll have a public hearing on the preliminary plat. After the public hearing, then we'll consider the approval of the preliminary plat. Then we'll have the resolution considering the final plat. So I will call on Director of Public Works City Engineer Glenn Olson to conduct this public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you can see on the screen, we have a piece of property that's owned by Pat Foley and his wife, and what they're looking to do is to subdivide, I'll call it the southwest portion of the piece of property off to be able to sell that to, I believe it's their son. So what they did is they put together this preliminary plat. We have reviewed it. The utilities companies have reviewed it, and the recommendations for changes have been included in the final plat. Those recommendations include an increase of side yard setback on the north side of the garage from 7 to 10 feet to meet our setback requirements, and the installation of I believe there's an easement along Main Street on the final, but everything checked off, and we would recommend approval of the preliminary plat.
Is there anyone either on the council or in the audience that wishes to speak as part of the public hearing? If not, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close.
Second. Motion by Russ, seconded by Jim to close the public hearing. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. The motion does pass. We'll now move then to agenda item number 3, consider the approval of the preliminary plat. Any questions? If not, is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Motion by John, seconded by Russ, to approve the preliminary plan. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close voting. And the motion does pass. We'll move then to agenda item number 5. This will be to consider the resolution adopting the final plat. And once again, Glenn.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. You can see on this, on the final plat, the adjustments have been made to the side yard setback, and we would recommend approval subject to the city's review, city attorney's review of abstract of title and title opinion.
Questions? If not, is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Russ. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close voting. The motion does pass. Agenda item number 6. This is the consider the vacation of utility easements in the Carr Estates 4th edition. Once again, we'll have a public hearing on the proposed resolution that would grant the petition to vacate the easements, and then following the public hearing, we'll take action on that resolution. Once again, I'll call on Glenn Olson, Director of Public Works, City Engineer, to conduct this public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a request by the property owner to eliminate the easements on, between two lots on this cul-de-sac, Scott Circle, just south of Windstar Street. Do you have one more page? Right, there you go, great. Okay, so this is the easement that they'd like vacated, and the reason for that is they bought both these lots and they want to build a fairly large house across the property line and the easement lines. The same owner owns these two lots and is swapping them out for these two lots. We did talk to the utility company. They already had previously gotten an easement along this line and installed the power to the light pole at that location. There are no other utilities in that utility easement, and you can see it's a small item, but we're vacating the easements only to the north line of this easement and the south line of this easement. So it's not eliminating the entire easement along that property line. It skips the top and the bottom easement lines to allow utilities to be placed through the ends. So the legal description includes just that red hashed area. We would recommend approval.
Thank you, Glenn. As part of the public hearing, is there anyone here in the audience or on the council that wishes to speak as part of the public hearing?
Move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve to close the public hearing. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting, and the motion does pass. We'll now then move to agenda item number 7, which would be to consider the resolution granting the petition to vacate the utilities.
So move. Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And a motion passes. Now move then to the consent agenda. We'll bring the items up on the screen that are on the consent agenda. And they include consider the authorization to declare vehicles as surplus property for the Marshall Police Department, consider the approval of the transient merchant license for TNT Fireworks, consider the renewal of the Minnesota Municipal Utility Association service agreement, management's program services for 2019, consider the city farm lease parcel 2 lease extension and parcel 7 addendum, and then finally consider the approval of the bills and the project vehicles. So is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants removed for purposes of separate discussion?
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Russ. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And that motion does pass. Now then move to agenda item number 14, consider a letter of support for United Community Action Partnership. Sharon Hanson, City Administrator.
Mr. Mayor and Council, this is a request from United Community Action Partnership, also called UCAP, to provide for planning grant dollars. And the Department of Transportation has, for the last several years, promoted regional transit systems, and this would be a grant planning process for Regional Transportation Coordinating Council. And they are simply asking for a letter of support for the grant application. And we'll add, I believe that Councilman Lozinski has been a participant in some of these discussions, and he wants to add something to this request.
It's a request for transportation from the surrounding towns into Marshall. They're bringing to link the communities together better, and that's what the request is for.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Jim. Questions? If not, is there a motion to allow the letter of support?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Russ, seconded by Jim. Discussion?
So I will be abstaining on this one.
Other discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. I did not pick up my vote.
Do you want me to reopen it? Or just-
Well, I voted yes, so
Okay.
if you
And
just,
the prior action item, your vote did
No.
not show up either.
No, yeah, I think Kyle will follow up with
okay. So that vote does pass. We'll note Councilmember DeCramer's abstention from that vote because he's on the UCAP board. We'll move then to the agenda item number 15, the recommendation to reject the farm bid and authorize the advertising to rebid the farm lease. Dennis?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. While in a perfect world, the bidding of this would have occurred in the fall, but because of replatting, uncertainty as to what property would be held for for lease, bidding was recently done. It's 127.7 acres, but bidding land that's been under construction, heavy compaction. We only received the one bid. We had hoped that there would be more bidders. And of course, after the bid comes in, then we got some further inquiries from people. We had 3 prior inquiries. We notified all those 3 inquiries, plus we published the notice. Had only the one bid, but because the property is held for rent, now the city has to pay real estate taxes on that parcel of property. Real estate taxes are about $26 an acre. The bid would give us $10 an acre as, the income received. So if we do accept this bid, we still are losing money. If we reject the bid and rebid it and get nothing else, we think our costs are probably going to be the $26 an acre for taxes, plus probably about $50 an acre just to put a cover crop, whether it's hay or oats or something. So I think it's worthwhile to attempt to do this again. The bidder has been notified that the recommendation would be to reject the bid and to solicit additional bids.
So if we would authorize the rebidding, what is the time frame for receiving the bids?
We have to have, at least 10 days published notice, so it's going to be the end of the month at the earliest. And I understand, and I know that May 15 is the date that federal crop insurance applications are in. So it is potential that there may not be federal crop insurance available to insure this year's crop on the property.
The alternative would be, given that this is a 3-year lease agreement, the uncertainty here and why, there was a minimal bid is because that ground has been completely regraded. There's stale soils that need to have mineralization happen, and the fallback position would be to not rent it out this year, seed it down to small grain, disc it down, allow the soil to get in shape, and then you'd have rentable ground for the following 3 years, rather than locking yourself into the 3-year unknown. And in fairness to the renters, they don't know what they're going to get either.
And I know there is a concern as to if there's any existing tile that's still working, hasn't been cut, hasn't been crushed, what are we going to do with tile? But you're right, I know the compaction issue, moving the dirt around, you got clay and you got black dirt on top of it, it may not be productive for 1 to 2 years is what I was told from prospective bidder.
And that's another reason why we recommended a 5-year lease on the first time, so that we have 2 years left of this current 3-year lease cycle, and then 3 more years after that. So we thought in the 5-year period of time, they would be able to get some return from the property.
And I don't think year 1 and 2, $10 an acre lease, there's not much risk there, but I thought there'd be some additional money for years 3, 4, and 5, but not much, so.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, my understanding is that the bidder was also going to plant small grain via alfalfa. I guess I think that's small
I'm not
grain.
certain
I
about
don't
that.
know.
I heard corn and
Small
beans
grain.
in the discussion.
Great, but
Okay.
you're okay.
I heard corn and beans in the discussion, but not much thought, they didn't think there'd be much by yield at all. We did have somebody who did inquire about haying it for the 5 years, but did not submit a bid.
I don't suppose we can consider getting this approved as a biosolids application site for the first year or two and put some biosolids on it.
Possibility.
Sure. We can check into it. It costs us more to haul it over there, but it might make the property more valuable.
Right.
The other thing we're looking at doing is if the bids didn't come back favorable, rather than leasing it out and the city paying taxes, maybe we do it. Maybe we hire it done. Then it's not a cash crop, and then we don't pay taxes.
So if you were to not have a harvestable crop there.
Correct.
Like plant small grain there,
And just turn it down.
and then turn it down, and in the meantime, you got a summer place to put your biosolids.
Right.
Yep. We can check on those possibilities during the time of bidding.
I'd be willing to make that as a motion.
I'd second that.
Well, what is your motion here?
My motion is that the city don't re-advertise for bids, just hold it on our own for this year, plant it into small grain ourselves, and then turn it down. We'll open it back up after we see where it goes, rather than somebody else taking a risk on it. Let's take the risk ourselves. It's our land. We don't have to pay the taxes. And then we can also look into the potential of applying biosolids to try to augment the soil.
Can we put alfalfa in it too?
Well, I think whatever we think is right,
Okay.
alfalfa or small grain. I think we crop it, we cover crop it ourselves.
I would say not,
Alfalfa's gonna croak. I think if we put a grass crop in, we'll be fine.
but anyway, you made a motion, you made a second.
Yep.
Is that motion like clear as mud?
So the motion
Motion
There's
is-
the dirt that's
to reject bids and that we put a small grain cover crop on it for this year and also explore the potential of applying biosolids from our wastewater plant to it to help augment soil.
I second.
And what the whole intent there is to rehabilitate the soil. And of course, the long-term use there is for an
Industrial development, right. You're not trying to create cropland, that's a beneficial.
My question on that, then, that can't be hay or nothing, that's just a cover crop,
Right.
and you plow it under or disc it under, and
It's great wildlife.
I'd say it's a pheasant's forever.
Yeah, temporary.
You disc it down the first part of August, and then it regrows by fall.
Yep.
So that comes to a cost of approximately $50 an acre, give or take. Do the city have, we'd have to hire someone to do that, correct? We do not have the equipment to slap that. Preston doesn't have those cedars slap out there.
Well, I mean,
We hire it done.
we hire them.
Okay, everybody understand the motion on the table?
Mr. Mayor, just one question. At what point then do we re-advertise to lease it out?
I
for
think
the
we look
following
at it
year?
a
We
year at
wait
a
till
time.
the fall of the year?
In the fall
Okay.
of this year, yes.
That would be a better schedule.
Yes.
Then everyone knows where they're at for the growing season. Other discussion on the motion? That you okay with the motion? No other discussion, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And the motion does pass. Move then to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 16, the East Lion Street Reconstruction Project. We have the resolution before us that would receive the report and call for a hearing on the improvement. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This one is the paving of the gravel section of road from Trunk Highway 23 east to near the city limits line, actually just past the driveway to Vast. The intent is for us to meet with the property owners. We did try to set up a meeting before this one, and we couldn't get them all together. We're going to make that try again, and if we can't, we'll meet with each of them individually before the public meeting. So the intent is for this to be a special assessment project as a rehabilitation to the roadway. We have some special considerations here. We have one residential property that is a substantial size, not a normal in-town residential property. We have two commercial properties on the other side, and then where you see the tilled area, both sides of the residential property, that is outside the city limits. The three developed properties are inside the city limits, but the black tilled area is outside the city limits. So the costs of that would need to be borne by the city until some future date when there'd be a connection for some other use. So that's kind of the process. We are not guaranteeing that the project would go forward. We're starting the project as a special assessment project, and we'll see how that goes forward.
And as just additional background, this project is being brought forward based on the request of adjoining property owners.
An adjoining property owner with no dissension of one of the other ones. Just, we need to have a discussion with Coins on the corner. I mean, that's a real considerable potential expense, but Vast as well. I still can't believe how much traffic is generated by drop-offs of utility bills. You'd think that when you're out in that location, most people would want to just send it through the mail or have it done on their automatic payments. But there's a lot of traffic out there. If you remember too, that area was used as a detour route by MnDOT for one of their projects. So it does create a lot of traffic at various times. We just, being it was requested, It wasn't really a petition for improvement, it was a request. There's a lot of dust that is generated by that gravel. So we take care of that with calcium chloride in the summer, salt, to wet that down. It also then creates a corduroy road, really rough, so it takes additional blading and maintenance, but sometimes you can put up with a little bit of inconvenience too, depending upon what it's going to cost you to do something else. I know Mrs. Laporte complains a lot about the dust coming off that road, and I don't blame her whatsoever. It's tough to keep the dust out in that location, so.
So Glenn, for my edification,
Yep.
you're saying that, let me see if I can, why isn't this on? There it
Operator error.
is. Yeah.
Yep.
So this is not city limits.
That's correct. And neither is the other side.
This is not city limits.
No,
And
and that's
this is
not city limits.
So you've got no city limit?
No.
No city limit?
Yep.
You're saying that?
All of that is even including his pasture.
How is that in city limits when neither one of these is?
That was by request,
That was by request?
yes.
And then these guys are in city limits too?
Yes.
So city limits is
Yep, straight,
Here.
yep,
All
that,
this?
yes. Everything that you see is not black,
but not this, not this.
correct?
So this resident asked to be in city limits?
Yes, to get services.
It is the resident that's making the request for the,
Yeah,
it's not the
improvement.
commercial businesses.
No,
Because her share is with a max of 5,500, I assume.
yeah, or whatever it is at the time, yeah. And it is
And I
one,
know Steve Klein has voiced his opinion on this.
well, we haven't talked to him yet about cost.
Because he's
Yeah,
made that comment to me before that nobody lets him know what's going on.
right.
And some of the crowd, we haven't walked past this house in the last couple of months, so I haven't heard that for a while.
Sharon?
Why haven't we met with the clients? I mean, what's the
Be-
delay?
Because we were going to meet with all three of them in the same room at the same time to explain everything the same. That's what we like to do, so everybody hears the same story. If anyone can't meet, in this case that Laporte's could not meet at that time, we'll schedule them separately. We'll try one more time to get them all in the same room so that they can all discuss it, or we can meet with them individually. We'll tell them all the same story. Sometimes
That would happen prior to the public.
prior to the public hearing. Yep, for sure.
Other input?
And just a question, is curb and gutter really necessary?
No.
ultimately? Okay, because that was part of that, just a
Yep,
consideration.
curb and gutter is not necessary.
Okay. And my other question, and it's probably become at our last Ways and Means, and maybe this on page 114, further on down here, the proposed schedule, because we talked about changing that, that we would notify the property owners what their assessment would be prior to the start of contract, so they knew all that. Okay.
And an issue with that is we want to make sure that we understand which policy we'll be using for special assessments.
Correct. And my last question, the American Engineering Testing, all of that stuff is dated from the February of 18. Those prices still in effect, or do we have to get new ones?
We've already done the borings for it.
Okay, so that prices have been updated.
Any other input?
So my question tails on Councilmember Labatt's. Curb and gutter is not required.
No,
What if we do a long-range plan, go back to the picture?
yep,
So if you look at long-range planning, and we have, this is already city limits.
Yep.
He is by petition. As we perceive Marshall growing, is this going to eventually be city limits?
yes.
Why would you put curb and gutter?
Just for cost,
Planning.
yep.
I mean, on the goods, on the planning side, you put it there, it's already there, you don't need to readdress it in the future. You need to maintain it, and maybe it's 12 years before something happens.
The only the reason I bring it up is it's going to add an expense to the project, so you've got 3 property owners that are going to be
Right.
affected, so just,
Right, but if somebody's petitioning it, I mean, if we're gonna do it, do we do it right the first time, or do you?
The other thing that we are doing is making it narrower than a normal city street. It's going to be wide enough for 2 lanes of traffic plus some additional shouldering. So it won't be our normal 36-foot wide street with plus curb and gutter. It's going to be paving the existing section with some additional safety shoulders, both some asphalt, some gravel, and then just a rural section which currently exists the whole way. That's the intent.
Again, if you're thinking in the future, is it right to do it that
Yeah.
way, or do you build it to city street standards?
I would say, looking at the future plan of this area, I think that this street will be wore out before you see that development. And that's why I think without the curb and gutter is a good idea.
I just got to ask if there's storm sewer, anything in there now?
Just the ditches.
Just the ditches, so
Yeah.
you would.
We have
if you
some
did put
culvert
curb and
replacement.
Gutter in or something, if you came back later in a development, you'd probably putting in storm sewers, you know, I'm not sure if
In
you
the
want to
grade
put curb
that-
and gutter in now.
Yeah, in the grade that's there, most of the water would run downhill all the way past Vast,
Yeah.
with or without curb and gutter.
Yeah, this currently functions like a township road.
It is.
Well, and we do have a history of where we border on outside the city limits, not
Yeah.
doing that complete street. We had that on South First Street years ago, we had that on North Seventh Street until a couple of years ago. Just because there were unknowns about how that would, there is the ability to either rebuild the street if it's aged or expand that shoulder into the curb and gutter. So you have a good point that it's not this year, but this project.
No.
Other input?
I move accepting the resolution, receiving the report, and calling for the hearing on improvements.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve. Discussion? No, one piece of discussion is that, we want to have at the hearing the alternative and no curb and gutter. And what that would do to the
the
scope of
cost?
project.
Okay.
Other, Sharon?
On the dates, so you're going to meet with them before you need to set the public hearing.
We're setting the public hearing for March 26th because we do intend to meet with them one way or the other, either
if
as
they
a
don't
group
want it?
or individually before then.
If they don't want it.
If they don't want the project, oh yeah, that's, they can certainly express that. We want to just explain what the project is and what the potential cost would be, and then have the public hearing, and they're certainly invited to that. They get a notice for coming to that hearing. So.
You know, Steve Klein talked to me about this project a while back, and he asked why it wasn't done at the same time that did the J-turn intersection last year, and I inquired, and they said MnDOT would not allow it.
Right.
So, I mean,
Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And the motion does pass. Move then to the next agenda item. This is agenda item number 17. This is the Huron Road Superior Road Reconstruction Project. Once again, we have a resolution before us that would receive the report and call for a hearing on the improvement. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. You can see the improvement area on the screen. The north and south road, that's Superior Road, and that would be total reconstruction, similar to everything south of there. The Huron Road portion that goes east and west between the Trunk Highway 59 and Superior would be water main replacement only, funded 100% by MMU. They have made that request because of significant water breaks in the area, and so they wanted to continue with that. We'll be doing the same thing with them. We have very few property owners along there. We will try and meet with all of them at one time, and that would be before the public hearing as well.
Everybody on that discussion, if there's strong objection of total reconstruction on Superior Road, the immediate need is water main replacement only.
Yes, and then we would do spot repairs to the sanitary sewer.
Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Huron also, you said that's related to water main replacement?
Yes,
So it would be 100% paid for by MMU?
yes.
And that's a full width reconstruction? Or
No.
We're just going to do a utility
10
slice
foot
with a
slice.
box? Yep, okay, good.
Yep.
Right.
Just a comment on that as well, and MMU has also discussed this, and they do plan on going ahead whether city participates in the rest of the build or not. This has been a problem area for them, and they're going to get it repaired. It is,
On both Superior and
Mhm.
Huron.
Correct.
yeah, I say I knew Huron, I wasn't sure on the Superior. And this would be a considerable cost savings to the businesses there if they do it at this time, but if they choose not, that's their choice, so,
Mhm.
yeah.
Where is the current construction going on? Are we connecting to the Superior Street we're working on, or Bill did last year?
Yes,
Right where it stopped?
That's correct.
That is the,
that's the connection point.
so if we just do utility repairs on Superior Street, how is that going to affect, I mean, how's that going to tie it with the new construction? It won't affect their utilities though. If the owners object, we just do a trench box to the road.
Correct. And ultimately, it costs them more, but that's their decision to make.
That's their decision.
Yep.
We lay it out to them and they
Yep.
give it back to us.
Decision. Absolutely.
Other input or questions?
Just a question on the width of the street, Glenn. As you know, we have some comments regarding the width of the street that was already done last year,
Mm-hmm.
mostly negative. I see you're recommending that if we proceed with this, it will be narrower again. I suppose that's just to match up with what you did last year?
Yes, and the information that we are putting out is that we don't believe it needs to be wider. There's no parking on either side. There are significant numbers of driveways going into the properties, but if they want them wider, we can make it wider.
Because we did hear at
It
the
just-
Ways
yep,
and Means,
yep,
because
by
I think
at
a couple
least one.
property owners that they had wished that we hadn't done that, or else maybe even been notified that we, I'm not sure what their exact terminology, John, if you remember, but I know they thought it was a little bit more of an inconvenience that we made that road narrower.
We can make it wider.
What is the
It costs
width
more.
of the road that we rebuilt?
I
It's a
believe.
40 foot, isn't it?
45
Yeah, it
existing.
was. The
It was, we
existing
put it down
roadway
to-
width, down to 40, I think it was 6 feet,
38 point.
yeah.
Yeah, that was entirely for, well, you made
Just-
changes on the corner for turning for
Right.
semis,
We made
And that was-
50-foot radiuses for the semi-turning,
and that was intended for cost savings of
yeah.
the cost of the road.
We're pretty frugal for recommendations. If anybody wants it bigger and pay for it, we're okay with that.
And I applaud you for that, Glenn, but I
Yeah.
think we just have to make that clear to the property owners
Yeah.
that, if that's not their wishes,
And you know, sometimes in the informational meetings, we talk about numbers like that, but you don't have a perception of what it'll look like when you're done. So, you know, we did tell them what the change was gonna be for width, but like I say, do you know what that means out in the?
and we can tell them that we're going to narrow it because it's going to save them money.
Yeah.
And they're not thinking a year down the road, thinking,
Right.
oh,
Mm.
that's a more inconvenience for
Yeah.
us.
Another thing I could just mention, that the one property owner has like 3 or 4 driveways, and we are questioning whether or not they need them all, because it looks like some of the haven't been used. So that's the kind of thing we ask the property owner for. Do you need the driveways you have? Should they be the width that they are? Should some be wider and some eliminated? Are they in the right place? Because if you do reconstruction, you can relocate all of that, size and location. It's up to them.
And I know one of those property owners talked to me, and they want to redesign their parking area at the same time, and that would address some of those.
So that's what we talk about at the meeting. We get as much back from them as we give to them, generally.
Okay, any other questions? If not, you have the request.
I move the resolution to receive the report and call for a public hearing on improvement.
I'll second that.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim. Discussion? There's no discussion. We will move to a vote. Close the voting, and the motion does pass. Move then to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 18. Consider the approval of the proposed police department organizational structure and the amended 2019 wage schedule. With this is Chief Jim Marshall, as well as Human Resources Director Sheila Dubs.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you. This evening, Jim and I are here to propose amendments to both the organizational structure and the wage schedule relating to the police department. We did review our proposals with the Personnel Committee on March 1st, and it was recommended unanimously to bring that to the full council. Director Marshall did a nice memo in your background materials that he will also review with you this evening and answer any questions that you have. The legwork that I did in terms of this restructure or this organizational change is looking at job descriptions. So 2 of the job descriptions were reevaluated and were revised. One is a new job description, a captain, and then the other job description is a sergeant job description. After Jim and I reviewed those and revised them, we also sent them to our Hay pointing consultant for a review of that. And in your background materials, you'll see that the captain position came in at 588 points and as an exempt position, which means it would not be eligible for overtime. And the sergeant position was recommended for a slight decrease from 441 to 421 points. And that does remain a non-exempt position or eligible for overtime as it is today. And the resulting wages, you'll see it's, I believe, the last page in your packet. For the sergeant, even though there was a slight reduction in points, it is in the same pay band, and so the pay range actually didn't change. I'm going to ask Jim to come up and explain a little bit more about the structure and the benefits that the structure will bring to the department.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for your time. The agenda item that is in front of you tonight is something that I've focused much of my attention the past few months on, and I'm willing to answer any questions that you have regarding this proposal for restructuring. I do believe, though, that the command structure that you find in your packet tonight does strengthen our communications and assignment of responsibilities, as well as it provides for opportunities within our organization for advancement and leadership. You know, when I began working on this proposal, I tried to look at several different areas that would be helpful to me in determining on how best to proceed with this restructuring. Looked at 3 different things. Number 1 was I wanted to look at some background and get some historical information as to how we got to where we are today. I then wanted to do some, what I guess I'm going to call it, some organizational research, kind of an internal reflection of our organization and look at things that we do well as look at areas where I felt that we could see some improvements. And then I also wanted to move into the area of maybe coming up with ideas or a vision or a plan on how we best can move forward and strengthen our police department and really enhance the services that we provide to our community. So the first area that I talked about was the background and some historical information to understand. I wanted to understand how we got to the point where we are today with such a horizontal command structure, kind of flatlined, which is not typical of most police organizations. Most organizations usually have a strong vertical command structure or chain of command. And so what I did is I initially reached out to past employees, people that had many years of service within the Marshall Police Department, to kind of get a feel to why we are what we are today and how we got to this point. The second part of this is the organizational research. And this is maybe where I have a little bit more benefit than most people, because I have 20 years of experience within our organization, and I've had the opportunity to identify things that we do well, as well as identify areas in which I think we can see some improvement. And during this time, I identified 4 areas that I wanted this restructuring proposal to touch. First thing is I wanted to address our case assignment management within our detective division. And by doing so, I figured I could maybe pull some of those administrative responsibilities away from the detective sergeants so they could really focus on case management and kind of boots on the ground dealing with cases. The second area that I identified during this time was I wanted to either increase or ensure, at the very least, that we don't decrease our frontline supervision within our police department. You know, we have a very young police department, and with that, we have officers that still need guidance and direction, and as they mature and become seasoned police officers. Another area that I wanted this proposal to touch was the preparation and planning as we move forward with our body cameras, to really define some of those roles and responsibilities on who's doing what with regards to body cameras. And then the fourth area, the last area that I thought I wanted to address with this proposal was regarding recruitment, and maybe just as importantly as recruitment, the retention of good employees, to provide opportunities or leadership for our officers as they move forward and advance. So I talked about background, I talked a little bit about our organizational research, and then it comes time to come up with an idea or a plan or a vision. And I shared this with the personnel committee that when I started this, my goal was never to come up with a position for a person, that I wanted to come up with a position that clearly filled the gaps that I had just referenced, and I'm sorry about that, fill those gaps and really strengthened those deficiencies that I had referenced. After coming up with an idea or plan, I worked closely with Sheila, and she had a lot of input and help as I worked through this. And once I did that, I moved forward and brought this idea, this vision to the leadership within the police department. And I can share with you that everybody was very positive and encouraged by this proposal, and really felt that this would strengthen our police department overall. The good news with this proposal is that it doesn't add any additional personnel, that it's rather really just restructuring or coming up with a different chain of command within our organization. Towards the bottom of your packet, or the proposal that I gave to you, it talks about maybe the fiscal impact that this may have. On the low end, we figured about $2,704, and on the high end, we're currently about $6,365. I think out of just respect for your guys' time, maybe, Mayor, I'll stop, and then maybe answer any questions that you guys may have, or maybe Sheila can answer the questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Sheila. Before we move to questions, any input from the Personnel Committee who has already considered this?
To start off with that, we did consider, we are recommending the changes, and just personal opinion, that this was very well laid out and explained, similar to what you're doing tonight, more detail yet that was provided. So just looked like a good suggestion and good plan to move forward with.
So from my standpoint, I think that Jim and Sheila did just a fantastic job, and again, to reiterate what Chief Marshall said, is that this is a position to fill gaps. It's not a position that we're building for one single person. So going forward, this gives it longevity and flexibility, because it's a position that we need for the city, not a position for a certain officer. And then the other thing I think that's really important is that Marshall has done a great job, and we've done a really good job recruiting good police officers. We've done a horrible job at retaining them because there wasn't room for growth, and so we were kind of like the basic training and gave them really good training, and then they'd move off to bigger, better fields. And I think this will keep good recruits in Marshall so that we can develop a really good, strong, community-focused police force. I'm in favor of this.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Thank you. I agree with both Councilman DeKramer and Councilman Meister, and I want to add that I really appreciate the vision of the structure change of going from the horizontal kind of flat model to building the strength of leadership and load management with a vertical structure, and I really appreciate that. And again, I want to really echo what Councilman Meister said about the importance of retention, and this is one step. And obviously, as we look through and finish up with our contract stuff, we're gonna continue to have to move the challenges. But I really appreciate Chief Marshall's focus on development and retention, because I think that's also important. We do a great field training program for our new officers, and we develop good police officers, and we've got to really work now on having that retention and longevity within the department to continue to strengthen that. So I look at this as a very important step in that process, and I fully support this, and I hope the rest of the council gets behind and supports it also.
Thank you.
Great. We'll open up for any questions from any member of the council.
I just want to thank him for his expertise and I guess working with the staff. That's important, to get their input. You could have very probably just made this decision by yourself, but I applaud you for getting the input from your staff, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other input?
I move we approve the proposal for reorganization structure and amend the 2019 wage schedule as proposed.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Russ. Discussion? If there's no discussion, we'll move to a vote. We will close the voting. And the motion does pass. Move then to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 19. This is the consideration of the revised procedure to calculate special assessment amounts due for public infrastructure projects. And before we get into a lot of discussion on this, let me just make a comment or two, and that is, this has been under consideration for quite some time. There's been many meetings. There's been a lot of diligent work by staff, by the council, and specifically the Ways and Means Committee. So a word of thank you to all of those that were involved in that. While he's not here tonight, Glenn Barracoler did a substantial amount of calculations and running proposals and researching. And so Glenn is to be commended for a lot of his really diligent work. He's not here tonight because of some family issues, but he's probably watching us on TV, or at least will. So know that Glenn's effort really should be recognized by the community. So with that, Dennis, are you going to start with this? Dennis Simpson, City Attorney.
Well, it wasn't planned to work like this. Everything that you did, and you went through your history, organization, plan, and vision, ultimately that's what brings us here for this next discussion on special assessments.
But Jim ended up with a unanimous vote.
I'm just trying to tag on, his shirt tails here. Step up the game. Yeah, I know. Yeah. History, comparison, background. City councils, whether it's this city council or prior councils, have been dealing with special assessments for many years. Even the establishment of the residential rate, that was 3 strikes that took over a couple of year process. It started out, we had 3 major projects going on in the residential section that we took the costs of the project and assessed the costs to the property owners. And those costs are in the $8,000 to $12,000 range per lot, residential lots. And that's where we got all the complaints. So then we went and we had an appraisal, and the appraisal said you can only support a $5,000 amount. That was still objected to, which landed us in a court situation, and the court said, nope, 5,000 is not the number, 4,720 is the number. So, I mean, that started out 12 to 5 to the 4720. So that's the history of the residential, that's 13 years ago, and that number has increased over a period of time to the present $5,500 residential maximum. The present project that has caused much review, discussion, consideration is a commercial commercial industrial property, and we really don't have the maximum set on there like we do in the residential. And the setting of the maximum has caused some research, some background, some comparisons. We have looked at what do other cities do by way of costs for the street, and those are all over the board. You know, $50 ranges up to $190 per linear foot. This particular project, Superior, Michigan, the initial proposal was $166 per linear foot would be the costs that would be assessed to the commercial property owners. We did not have a formal appraisal, but we've had a project assessment, and that has indicated that no, that does not support $166 per linear foot. $115 is probably the maximum, which when you do the math as put forward by Mr. Bayer-Kohler, that's based upon the size of the road. And so we're at the $71.25 is pretty much the residential rate. But if we put in a heavier road, the 10-ton road versus 7-ton road, you do the math and it becomes about $100 per linear foot for commercial property. And so we've done the background, the organization, the research, reviewed other committees, and now the plan and the vision. We've had how many meetings, Ways and Means, how many meetings with, you know, Mr. Bayer-Kohler has spent a considerable amount of time. Staff, we've looked at all of the court cases that have been decided on that. Now, Mr. Bayer-Kohler and I do disagree. I think less is more, so that's why I've got about a page and a half. Mr. Bayer-Kohler must have been, this is something only a judge would appreciate after a long trial, or maybe students would appreciate in his classroom setting with about a 10-page summary of this. So he and I disagree, but you've got it in front of you. This would be the procedure to be established. Now, it does require a little more mathematical work by the engineering department because there's 3 different formulas you have to run, but you assess the lesser of the 3, whether that's the cost versus benefit. That's always the analysis that has to be done, but sometimes costs are within that amount. Now, I think we do have one of these projects that if you do the math, if you take the size of the property divided by 10,000 square feet, the average size of a residential lot, and you do the math, I think there's one of these that comes out less. The lesser of the amounts is if you do the math and figure it on square footage, not the frontage footage. There's about 8, I think it's about 8, so it's in the $45,000 range, where the initial discussion was about a $98,000 cost when you do the front footage, because it's a long, skinny lot. So it does take some time to work through the mathematical computations as set forth, but it requires three assessments, just 3 mathematical computations be done, and you assess the lesser of all 3. And generally, it's the front footage times the size of the road. It is a complicated procedure, and understanding Minnesota law on this it's taken a while. That's kind of the education process that goes on with the Ways and Means Committee, my office, the engineering office, and now if you can decipher all of this, then it's in front of you right now.
Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah.
Input first from the Ways and Means Committee that may have some.
I'll start with that. You know, like Dennis says, we went through, we look at, you know, what is the actual cost, what is the cost based. Really, everything we did went back to the reflected in what we do in the residential area. So really taking it from there. If your parcel is of a size that is, you know, just divided by the normal or the typical residential area, we look at it from that end of it, and we looked at a fixed frontage from the frontage side, and And as I said, we go through, look at that, and then take the lesser of the three. The net effect on all of these, very straightforward, is that it is going to cost the cities more. That we're trying to cover that, but trying to follow as best as everyone can determine, and as what our legal counsel says is, follow the statutes and do that in as fair a means as possible, looking at, as much of the various things. There was numerous ideas. I think we had about 4 or 5 ideas that were brought forward over the period of time. They all started centering in on somewhat the same thing, and we finally converged on this version that really is kind of I think Dennis described it at one point in the meeting, kind of a mashup of what we had versus other cities and everything else, and really taking the best out of all of those. So this is the plan we have ahead of us, and it is, I can't say it's really that confusing. It's more complicated in the calculations that need to be done. Again, Councilman Bierkohler went through a lot of pains in doing a lot of examples so everybody can follow the math and going through, see the variation, what goes on. So I guess if anybody has any questions, we will try to answer it. So
Open up for any just general discussion. Sharon and Craig.
I just want to reinforce that the project appraiser validated the method of using residential for commercial industrial assessment procedure. The project appraiser also did validate the use of front footage and square footage of residential lot, and that's what's part of this procedure. One thing that maybe we don't want but is likely out there is we may not have resolved a pending litigation situation. We don't know at this point. So it's important to have validation by that project appraiser. The other comment I'll make a little bit about the calculations, and this might get into the next action item, which is the fee charged as far as the maximum, and I have some other comments on that. But one of the reasons, in addition to what Council Member DeCramer said about the different examples presented by Council Member Bierkohler, is that he wanted to illustrate that the different calculations may result in a revenue neutral situation. It isn't mean because the one fee looks like it's going up, it may not always mean that. There could be a reduction for residential, not an increase. And so that was one of the reasons he wanted to give the different illustrations. That's all I had on that.
Thank you, Sharon. Craig.
Mayor, first of all, I want to thank everybody in the Ways and Means, and especially, Councilman Bierkohler for all the work I know that he's put into this. And I've read through this and studied it as best I can. The one question that I have, and I'm actually looking at page 156 at the kind of the proposed or the target examples, and my question comes back to, if we adopt this, are we relatively sure that we'll maintain the 20% private participation in order to make the bonding requirements? Are we jeopardizing that in this? Or I suppose at a point in time, to be right, it maybe doesn't matter. We just have to find different funding, right?
We believe we are not putting that 20% at jeopardy. We are still, with all of these scenarios, we meet that statutory requirement of the 20%.
Okay.
Good point.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to, again, on Ways and Means, being the new member, I think Councilman Bierkohler, like Councilman DeCramer said, put an unbelievable amount of hours into this, and I think probably before the ink was even dry printing the pages for Sharon or else for Dennis, Bierkohler Glenn sent them another revision. So, which I applaud Glenn for that, and I wish he was here to take all this credit personally. But if he's listening, I hope he gets it. And I just want to be point blank, and Dennis, I think we started out in 2006 with 4720 as a residential, and that was, yeah. And the best of my knowledge, we increased that to 5,500 in 2018. I don't know if there was any other increases in between there.
Yes, it was, and it was not increased to the 5,500 in 2018. I think that was about 2014.
Okay,
It's
okay.
been several years, but it would go up in basically $100 increments over that period of time. But you're right, it's not.
And that's what that was probably the only reason I voted no at the Ways and Means, because I was opposed to the initial going up from 55 to 57. This council raised surface water management fees and everything else, and I'll explain to the city administrator, I'd rather see smaller increases every year than $200 increases every 4 years or 5 years or whatever the case may be. If we could just somehow tie that into surface water management increase, and I'm not even sure what that increase, but, if we look at the average since 2006, if my calculations are correct, it's about 1.42% per year. And I don't have a problem with that, and I don't think our residents would either. In fact, going from 55 to whatever the case would be. And again, I just want to explain that to the council, is that, and Ways and Means, that was the only reason I voted no, because I love the proposal. I think that this is something, as a taxpayer not being on the council, prior councils have struggled with this for since 2006. And I'm glad to see now that we have something here in writing. Whether it stands up in court, I think it will. I'm not a lawyer and I don't profess to be the legal expert, but there's some documentation. I did ask the city administrator too. I said if it takes into consideration on cul-de-sac lots, because they're pie-shaped, they're very narrow in the front, but as long as we're taking total square footage into that lot, we're covering both sides of that. So again, I think Glenn did a fabulous job working on this. I really do.
Yeah, you're right. All those discussions, front foot, square foot, all of that, yeah. And there was a specific issue addressed with odd-shaped lots, which would address cul-de-sacs.
It's, I know we're probably pending litigation on some commercial stuff, but I think it's a fair policy for them as well, I really do.
It's a better position for the city to go into any contest on an assessment when you have a policy that's really rooted in not only good policy, good math, but also a previous court action.
Right. And also it does require the law requires that if you are assessing that you use current figures. You can't use, well, the historical 5-year average of costs has been X. You have to say what the costs were in 2018, 2019. So the costs that are incorporated, that $71 per front foot, that's costs. When we've compared that with the Saratoga Street project just completed in 2018, front footage costs there were $66. So we're right where we should be with this policy.
Any other?
As somebody who's pushed special assessments, I think this has turned out well. I mean, I think as a business owner with property that gets assessed, I think this is fair. On the last council meeting, I brought up what happens when we don't take care of our infrastructure. There are cities that are dealing with that. I think it's, as we visit with business owners like you're going to do, Glenn, if they really object to it, then we don't need to do your street. But I think this is a very fair assessment. On the $5,700, 13 years ago it was $4,780. I think to be hitting 57 13 years later is saving the citizens money. Inflation's been greater than that. I believe that is below inflation. I think this is a good policy going forward, and I'm glad now we have one. So.
And just a clarification for Attorney Simpson and the council, the procedure and the fee are two separate action items?
Exactly right. And the notice when you see on page 156, which was brought up previously, the proposed totals, those are the totals that have gone out to the property owners so they can anticipate, though, that'll be the presentation at the public hearing next council meeting.
My only question is, did the Ways and Means Committee build that inflationary? Because I agree with Councilmember Labatt. It's easier to make stepwise inflationary adjustments as opposed to, 5 years from now it's been 5,700, and 5 years from now we're going to say it's got to be 6,500, as opposed to going up that percentage. I couldn't find that in the reading.
No, that was not part of it, but the fees do get reviewed, which is the next action item, do get reviewed annually. So we do really have that opportunity annually to take a look at it.
And as long as we, if it's, I believe if I understand this correctly, there's 2 votes we're going to take tonight, one on the policy and one on the fee. So, yeah, and if we could tie, again, if we could tie that fee into something that we adjust normally every January with the other fee schedules, I think that would be a great procedure.
It's got to make sense, so.
So any other input?
I would like to reiterate what everybody said. You know, sometimes we have certain council members who have great skills, and each one of us brings great skills. And I think in a case like this, where you really need an analytical mind who dives into the weeds at the cellular level, thank you, Councilmember Mayor Kohler, for going so deep. So
I'll make a motion that we accept the procedure.
Motion by Jim, is there a second? Seconded by John to adopt the special assessment procedure as was recommended. Discussion as was recommended by the Ways and Means Committee. Discussion on that motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And that motion does pass.
Yes.
There you go. Then we'll move then to the second action, that is agenda item number 20. This would be the resolution that would amend the 2019 fee schedule, and the adjustment would be on that participation level. Sharon?
I just want to add, again, back to the project appraiser. Her range for front footage was $75 to $80 times the average front footage. If you took that into consideration, the fee would be $6,000 to $6,400. So we are still below what a licensed appraiser would argue it could be. But I just wanted to throw that out for additional information. And I'm not saying we shouldn't go with the recommendation because of some of the other discussion that was mentioned. I really want to put that out there.
I would also add from Councilmember Kohler's input is one of his rationales for supporting the 5,700 is that the previous court action at residential, and then as you correct me if I'm wrong, that 4,720, that was based on a community that was at 4,720 in that community. Right now, residential is at 5,700, right?
correct. Makes sense.
So, discussion on or input on the proposal.
I think the 5,700 is fair. I know we talked about inflation, but like John said, we look at fees every year. And I think we should look at that fee every year on what the inflation rate is or what costs are going with road construction.
Other input?
Make a motion to approve the amended fees.
Second.
Motion by John, seconded by Jim. Discussion? Discussion will move to a vote. Close the voting. Motion does pass. Then we'll move to agenda item number 21. Once again, thank you everyone for all your work on those items. Agenda item number 21 is appointment to various boards and commissions. Earlier this evening, council met in special session, interviewed an applicant for the Planning Commission, and based on that, I would recommend that Kathy Lee be appointed to the Planning Commission for a term that will expire May 31st, 2019. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, Annette, are we doing a voice vote on this? There's no discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. That brings us then to agenda item number 21, council member or commission board liaison reports. Due to weather, the Regional Development Commission had their last meeting canceled. They now meet this coming Thursday So we'll see. And I also represent the Regional Development Commission on the MnDOT Area Transportation Partnership. And we did meet this past Friday, and the purpose of that meeting, main purpose, was the updating of the ATP plan for 2023. So they're always planning for years out. So that's the allocation of the federal dollars that would be available to the Area Transportation Partnership. Greg?
Mine have not met.
Steve?
Mine have not met.
Russ?
Library board met last night. A couple of things. They have approximately $6,500 in delinquent taxes on their 2018 budget that they can't close out, that they're going to work with the city. I'm not quite exactly sure where that is coming from or whatever, but that's, I guess they're going to meet with the city to try and rectify that situation. So it has to be resolved prior to the end of March. So, cash reserves for 2018 is about the same as the prior year, about a little over $100,000. They were concerned with snow around the fire exits, especially in the children's department. There are doors that are totally blocked. They're now going to contact Dean and see if they can get the snow removed prior to that. So, Police Advisory Board has not met, but I will be assisting with some interviews on Thursday, and CVB has not met.
And Jim?
Might have not met.
Move then to councilmember individual items. Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want, again, I mean, we've talked a lot about snow, and the city staff have done an amazing job. I've paid more attention to the private property owners, to our residents, and I think they've done a better job. I think that I'm sure everybody's just really ready to have winter be done with. And the one cautionary thing I just want to put out, you know, I hate to talk about, the good news is it's going to warm up. The bad news is that means things are going to melt, and we all have been watching the forecast. And I know our engineering department and our mayor has been watching the flood forecasts. I've been sitting on it too for a number of reasons, but I want to caution our residents too to pay attention, be ready, think about, you know, issues that we're going to have this spring are probably not new to any of us as property owners, but help yourself now before you have the problem. Think about things you need to do to kind of protect your home and to minimize the impacts. And I know a lot of people have been moving snow around their foundations and you know, trying to help it out that way. Man, I'm way too little too late to do that in my house, and I'm sure a lot of other people are. But and then also pay attention to the street and the drainage ways around your home. If you know that you have a storm intake that's along your curb and gutter frontage, make sure that it's open enough that water runs. I know the city's gone around and done a lot of opening, but if you can help that a little bit in the next day or two, I think it'll make a huge difference when we get the rain that they're forecasting, because I'm afraid that we're going to get some plugs here, and who knows what the future brings, but just the forecast for this week, we're going to probably see a lot of street flooding, so, and help take care of yourselves.
Check your signposts.
Yeah, check it all.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Steve?
I have nothing.
Jim?
Just reiterate what Craig said, and I'm going to go, I ran into a citizen, he ran to stop me, and he was saying how they're having so much trouble with snow, which I said, you know, our street department's done a great job. And I said to him, I said, help yourself. I said, this is basically, you know, it's like if we get a major windstorm, we gather together and help each other. This winter's been a major emergency with the snow, plain and simple. And I said, get a shovel out and clean out your own storm drain. You're 40 years old, you're not helpless. Sorry, I don't want to sound mean, but it is, the city belongs to you as a citizen. It doesn't belong to the city staff, it belongs to us as citizens. And he did shovel out a storm drain, and I know I did, our neighbors who went through it, and I think as citizens, I can't say enough what Craig said. If you know where your storm drain is and you're able to do it, help the street department and unplug it, because it'll help you in the long run. So, and I do want to commend our street department. I travel into other cities. Marshall's streets are excellent compared to, I would say, 80% of the cities in Marshall. And that is a credit to our street department. And I push snow too. They get up at 4 in the morning along with us. At 4 in the morning, they're pushing snow instead of spending time with their families on Sunday mornings, Saturday mornings, Friday mornings. So it is a credit to the street department. But again, as Craig said, help us help you.
one of the things I wanted to do when I was elected to the council is to go around and just take the time, being retired, take the time to go out and visit the various departments. And this month I was fortunate enough to spend some time with our Director of Public Safety, Jim Marshall, and he very professionally gave me a tour of the Law Enforcement Center and explained some of the things that they're presently doing, that he wanted to do, and everything else. And one of the other things, I did a ride-along, wasn't, first, when I told him I wanted to do it, he said, well, what night do you want to do it? And I said, I don't want to do it at night yet, I want to do it during the day. So, Officer Brian Arsdorf was very accommodating, and I couldn't thank him enough, and thank Jim Marshall for arranging it. You got to see firsthand, this happened to be snowing that day, so, it stopped a couple vehicles just for minor things, but we didn't have any arrests or major things going on, but just an awareness. Just an awareness of what they're doing, and my next thing is to ride along at night, because it's like Brian said, it's a totally different atmosphere at night. One of the things I asked him, and we had time to be in the squad car, and I asked about what are we concerned with in the city of Marshall? Are we concerned with drugs? Are we concerned with the legalization of marijuana? Because I'm concerned with it, And he says, yeah, we do have a drug problem in Marshall, and it's not so much the cocaine, but it's the meth. And being on the fire department, I seen that firsthand as well. But so it's, people want to say we don't have a problem. No, it was firsthand information for me that we do have a problem, and I applaud those officers for taking care of it and addressing it. Thank you again. That's all.
Russ, you know that if you want, you can arrange to be tased too.
And I suppose you'd like to witness that, right?
I've often talked to him about just about it, run.
Thanks.
You say no, it's not voluntary.
And John?
A couple of things that just comment on. I did take part last week with the race equity cohort was put on by League of Cities, right? Yeah. And there were 6 of us from the city, not just from the city staff, but from areas within the city, along with several other communities that were out there, Shakopee, several from further north than that, up by Bemidji, and really all over the state that finally got our meeting in after the snowstorm. Very interesting. We've got several others that are going to be scheduled here, or are scheduled, and go through the summers, so keep you up on that. Now that we've got through our whole assessment issue, I'm certainly not looking for trying something else, but one thing that does come to mind as we look at it, and as we had really an agenda item earlier, we've fixed our lot size cost here on the residential per lot size, yet we just made an allowance for one where two lots become one. We have several other very large lots out there. So at some future item, not necessarily very soon, but some future item when the streets that are out there now start needing to be reconstructed, we will have to take a look at that. We being a city, not necessarily the ones sitting here, but we will need to take a look at that as a city and consider how do we handle the wide variety of lot sizes from residential. So just put that into everybody's thinking as we look at the various lot size. So just something that hit me as we were going through, and with the one earlier agenda item, and I know we've got some out there. I think we had one case where we put 3 lots together for one. So, and we've had some larger homes, which is great. That's nice from a lot of areas, but you're now locking that into somebody that has a 60-foot or 70-foot lot size. So just keep that in mind. That's about it.
Thank you, John. And Jim, I'm going to ask you to come forward. So while you're coming, I'll talk about just a couple of things. First off, tomorrow, assuming weather permitting, the Chamber of Commerce has scheduled a State of the City meeting, so Sharon and I will be presenting there. And the reason I wanted Jim to come forward, and my apologies for not giving you too much heads up on this, but
you want to try the taser?
Yeah.
have a few minutes here this evening, Jim, in addition to his role as Director of Public Safety, under that, as we also on the position description on the org chart, is that he is also our Director of Emergency Management. And so they're, given the situation that we have now coming out of the melt of a historically large snowpack that we have for this date, as well as the forecasted rain, the possibility of a fast melt, and the concern about internal flooding, as well as a longer term concern about river flooding. Jim has convened the members of the emergency management according to our emergency management structure. So they now have regular meetings. I participate in that. And Jim, you might want to just make a brief comment about that. We do have an emergency management plan that is in place, and there are various aspects of that plan that fall on the expertise that we have in various departments within the city, and then we also have a communications plan that follows along. So with that, any comments you want to make would be good.
Sharon, I don't remember you mentioning this emergency management thing. Here's, you know, you're right, it's kind of a living document, our emergency operation plan that we have in place. And last Friday that we had met, and I'm just going to reiterate what Glenn had mentioned during that meeting, council members. We are so fortunate to have a mayor with, number one, the history that Mayor Burns brings to the table, but also the understanding and the knowledge of how this all works, even with waterways. And last week, I've actually probably had some sleepless nights kind of worrying about, first of all, the last 20-some years have been sunshines and rainbows, and my first few months it's going to be some type of catastrophic event. And I've been a little bit nervous. And actually after last week's meeting with the mayor and the input that Glenn had said, we'll be fine. I mean, there's been measures that have been put in place that are good measures that we'll be fine. There might be a few bumps in the road and some battles, just as the council members have mentioned with water, seepage, basement issues. But this community has resiliency, and we're going to be fine in the end. And a lot of it is because of the efforts of engineering and the mayor back in probably the early 90s, 93, when a lot of the flood mitigation projects had happened. And without that, we would be in a dire straits. We'd be in a catastrophic event probably right now as we speak. So thank you, Mayor, for that. And I think as we continue to move forward, we'll hopefully kind of convene some meetings. It is a concern, and it's just good to actually have discussion, whether it's formal or whether it's informal, on concerns and for our city. So thank you, Mayor.
So I think that thank you, Jim. The emergency operations plan, there's aspects of that relate to public safety and the police department, the fire department. There's aspects that involve our wastewater department and some of the keeping that system working properly, our engineering department, our street department, as well as the other support that we need to have all those operations. So that's, I guess, one of the reasons why the city adopted that emergency operations plan, and Jim's absolutely right that it is fluid, that, you know, roles do change, but the whole purpose is to be prepared for the uncontrollable, unforeseen, and I think Jim is right that we are probably as prepared as we could be at this point. So, Council may have some questions on that too as we get into even some of the staff discussion. With that, I'll move to the next agenda item, which is staff discussion. Sharon.
Mr. Mayor and Council, an informational piece for the council, which is that Springstead has joined forces with a company called Baker Tilly, and they're a large advisory tax accounting firm, and they also joined with another tax accounting firm called Umba, and they're going to join together all in one. And one of the requirements for us to continue to do business with them is to form or to sign a consent form acknowledging this new partnership. And so I intend to sign that form following a a review of the contract and consent with the city attorney as well on this. And I just wanted to make you aware of this. And besides this, I just want to reiterate what the mayor said, which is the state of the city. Tomorrow, last check, there's about 120 registrants for the event. We're actually doing it over Facebook Live, is my understanding. So if you can't make it, you can look at it over Facebook as well. So that's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Sharon, I had one other thing you may want to comment on this too. The Lyon County Co-op Prairie Pride is proposing a merger with Farmers Co-op based on Canby, as well as Lyon County Farm Service that's based out of Canby. Unbeknownst to me, maybe other people do this, but we are a member shareholder of Lyon County Co-op. So we're entitled to a vote on this merger vote. So I believe I have the authority to cast that vote. Unless someone else sees a big reason to vote no, I would just assume that we would support the proposed action.
I do want to add that Lyon County Co-op is, which has their main operations here in the city of Marshall, located where the Pride and Tires Plus stations are, that they would continue to manage or to have that here in Marshall. The staff would remain the same. They will be looking for a new manager due to retirement, but that was an assurance that we did get from the Lyon County Co-op, and they are looking for a new name, and if you are the winning name provider, you can get $250. So that's part of this too, if you can think of a new name.
If I win that, I mean, it's not my money to keep.
That goes into the city general fund.
Plus, I'm not that creative. So everybody's okay if I sign this?
Yeah.
With that, Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. A couple of items, and we'll talk snow first, of course. The street department, I know most of you know this, but the public maybe doesn't know it as much. When we talk about the street department in the work that they're doing, we have at least 2 from wastewater, at least 2 from engineering, at least 2 from building department, and they work in various areas, including at the airport and on the city streets. So if you see any of those, they may not be one of the 8 city street department employees, but right now everybody is participating and doing the work that has to be done. Another comment I want to make is the cooperation that we've received from other entities. MMU called me this morning, said if you're opening catch basins, we've got a skid steer loader and a front end loader and 2 guys and 2 trucks. Could you use those? Well, can we use those? So, but yes, that was the offer. We got a hold of the department right away. What area could they go to and not be in everybody else's way? They were sent to an area on the east side of town, and the area that we gave them to do, they completed it all today. So tomorrow they'll have another area to work with. I did call the county. We have some communication with the county engineer concerning a couple of things. One of them is much of our drainage goes to county ditches, and those county ditches may not be open. And they may, I'll give you an example. The area that we would use as an overflow to the Cottonwood system goes through a county ditch. That ditch historically backs up from Lake Marshall and backs up and actually goes over the Texas crossing at Klein Addition because of backup, not from flow from the river. Those are the kinds of things we are aware of, and so is the county. So when there is an issue downstream, that really does impact, I'll give you an example, the drainage ditch that goes down south of Thunderbird Road and the Carr Estates, that area, all of that drains to that ditch. We have the county ditch in town that we monitor. So we are monitoring with the county several other areas that aren't what you would say in the city limits, and they're aware of that as well. I also talked to the state maintenance people and indicated that we do have some significant areas along College Drive and Main Street, but really College Drive where one of the lanes is about impassable. There's still driving lanes to get through. They're not an emergency, they're getting through. And talk to them about opening catch basins and maybe widening the street out at some time. And he said, you know, we've got such a problem with blowing snow today, and it looks like we're going to have that for the rest of the week. We may not be able to get to it on a reasonable length of time. So if you want to do it, we'll pay you to do it. My answer is, of course, we have to take care of our stuff first. But if the time comes where they can't get to it and we're able to, they will pay us to do it, which is a great offer for if there's an emergency situation along there and they don't have equipment there. Separate from those things, we do have the notices out for, like Councilmember Schaefer said, you know, help yourself a little bit. And we're seeing that all over town. I think the notices that there have been roof collapses in the area and other people up on their roofs taking it down or contracting for that snow to come off the roof. It's happening more and more because somebody else is doing it. Should I be doing it? It's just watching out for your neighborhood and for the city, because we have had some collapses in the city limits. The wastewater treatment maintenance improvements is well on its way. We'll be getting bids in next month on those maintenance improvements there. Of course, since 2017, there are some cost increases, but you know, there's probably no reason to do a re-estimating of those costs because the bids are coming in. They are what they are. We have cost increases due to just the normal cost of things going up, but the biggest one, of course, is the steel cost. Steel costs have risen substantially since 2017. It is what it is. So when we get those in, we'll revise the cost, we'll bring it back to council. Bolton and Mink is the lead designer on the project, and we'll be giving a recommendation to you. You look like you have a question. That's all really I have. It's all centered around our construction projects for summer. We're trying to get those out, and the snow.
Thank you. Questions for Glenn?
Yeah.
The one additional item that both Councilmember DeKramer and myself forgot to mention, but the MMU has received the authorization to go out for bid. That authorization from the Public Facilities Authority, and in recognizing that they will receive the $7 million for the softening project. So that will go out for bid. I know the Utilities Commission and Brad Rose have talked about that. Those bids are anticipated to be received by late summer, early fall. And then, assuming award of the bid, then construction would start, and then that project would be completed and in service by early 2021. Okay. So that was good news.
Good news.
Dennis.
I'm not dealing with snow. Well, no, we hauled a bunch of snow out of our parking lot today. I don't know where the private haulers are dumping the snow right now.
Wherever the city's removed it. I'm just kidding, folks, don't do that.
Now that we've got special assessments out of the way, I'm sure there's other things that'll need to be addressed.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. We'll move then to.
One question, Sharon, are the town hall meetings going on? I was going to ask Kyle, but he's gone.
They have been scheduled. The first town hall meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, and we are going to run an ad in the Marshall Independent Saturday and Monday, and then do a lot of promotion on social media.
That's just with Ward 2 starting.
Correct.
The library.
At the library.
Yep.
Thanks for bringing that up. Good. Anything else before we move on? Then the agenda item number 26, the administrative report that you have for your review. Agenda item number 27, the information items, including the building permits. The listing of upcoming meetings is in agenda item number 28.
So move.
To adjourn, motion by Craig, seconded by Jim to adjourn discussion. If not, we'll move to a vote. Let's do a voice vote in it. Close voting. All voted in favor. We are adjourned. Thank you.